Chapter 545, Counterattack. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. With a rustling sound, green-robed emissaries' ashes scattered on the sea. In the blink of an eye, a top-class evil superior had disappeared from the world and was turned into ashes. Seeing this, all the present soldiers of the primitive world were startled. They lowered their heads and shivered with cold. They did not dare to breathe too loudly, for fear that they would become the Black Skeleton Flood Dragon King's next target. Green-robed emissary carried an imperial edict with him as an amulet. Unexpectedly, it still was unable to ward off the king's attack. Thus, it is obvious that the Black Skeleton Flood Dragon King has awesome power. Orange Star Emissary raised her head and looked up at the Black Skeleton Flood Dragon King. Her cold and proud face turned a little pale. With strong spiritual power and sparkling eyes, Zhang Yuochen could see more clearly than Orange Star Emissary. When the king launched his attacks, a circle of holy light had indeed emerged from green-robed emissary. The light flashed for a moment and blocked off the king's first attack. However, the Black Skeleton Flood Dragon King continuously launched dozens of attacks in a flash and pierced through the circle of holy light. As a result, green-robed emissary was killed. The king acted so quickly that nobody noticed that he had attacked a dozen times. Aside from a wave of his hand, none of the people could see his movements clearly before green-robed emissary broke up into fine powder. Green-robed emissary must have used the imperial edict, so it did not have much saint power remaining. Even though green-robed emissary was no match for the Black Skeleton Flood Dragon King, he could escape easily by virtue of the imperial edict. Zhang Yuochen also had an imperial edict. When Sword Saint Xuanji had accepted him as a disciple, he injected saint power into the imperial edict. Zhang Yuochen had not yet used the power of the imperial edict. Sword Saint Xuanji was the second headmaster of Saint Academy in the entire eastern region. His strength was at the top level. He was conferred as one of the three great sword saints of the eastern region. Thus, it could be seen that he enjoyed a very exalted status. The imperial edict issued by him was naturally powerful. With the imperial edict, Zhang Yuochen did not fear the Black Skeleton Flood Dragon King at all. As long as he wanted to leave, no half-cent could hold him. Zhang Yuochen had never used it before because its power would be reduced a little after it was used once. Therefore, he would not use it unless it was a critical situation. Even though he had an imperial edict, Zhang Yuochen did not plan to leave right now. He was thinking about how to kill the Flood Dragon tribe and break through to the ultimate realm of the Heaven Realm. And it would be best if he could get the Xuanwu heritage. When the Black Skeleton Flood Dragon King mobilized his beast soul, an invisible soul force burst out and spread in all directions, exerting itself on each soldier of the primitive world. He used the soul force to break the will of the soldiers and melt their consciousness. By doing so, he would enslave all the people. A sixth-level elder soldier of the primitive world took a step forward and snorted. "Even if I die, I won't work for a beast. You unappreciative old thing." Puff. The Black Skeleton Flood Dragon King sneered and slapped the elder on his head across the void space. With a crack, the elder's body collapsed and became a mass of broken bones and chunks of meat. "Who else?" the king asked hoarsely. His strong soul force finally broke the will of the soldiers. They did not dare to resist but dove into the sea and entered the bloody trench. Flying above the sea, 5 Flood Dragon tribe commanders turned into human-headed flood dragons and burst into laughter. Among them, one commander with a female head said in derision, "Extraterritorial humans thought that they stood high above the masses. But actually, they are timid and overcautious creatures. Our king just released a soul force and scared them like a group of turtles. Thus, they obediently lead the way for us." Upon hearing this, Huang Yanjun could not bear it anymore. She looked serious and took a step forward, attempting to grapple with the commander. Zhang Yuochen quickly stretched a hand out across her shoulder and dragged her back. "Zhang Yuochen, let me go!" Huang Yanjun shouted coldly. He shook his head and said, "Why should you go and court death? I would rather die than obey the indigenous savage beasts." Huang Yanjun stared at Zhang Yuochen with a pair of royal blue eyes. She said, "Zhang Yuochen, we are soldiers of the primitive world, so we shouldn't be afraid of death, right?" "Senior sister apprentice, you are too impulsive. Zhang Yuochen shook his head and said with sound transmission, "We were supposed to seek the Xuanwu heritage. Why should we not forbear temporarily and go to the bloody trench first? What if we really obtain the Xuanwu heritage?" Huang Yanqian said, "Forbear. I can't bear it. Even if we obtain the Xuanwu heritage, we will still not be able to defeat the Black Skeleton Flood Dragon King. In that case, we will still help him achieve his aim." "That's not necessarily true." Zhang Yuochen shook his head as though he had already found countermeasures. He stopped her retort and said firmly, "Senior sister apprentice, you must listen to me this time. Go into the bloody trench with me rather than court death." With a stern look, he grasped her arms and dragged her into the water. They dove into the sea along with those soldiers of the primitive world. Swoosh! Zhang Yuochen released his celestial body shield to form a chi shield with a diameter of 3.3 meters. The chi shield pushed the seawater away and sank slowly. Huang Yanqian casually struggled but could not shake off his hands. She did not resist again but dove into the water as he requested. Alxinian and Orange Star Emissary also released their celestial body shields and followed them. The bloody trench was bottomless. The seawater was biting cold. Moreover, the water pressure became stronger as one dove deeper. The soldiers' celestial body shields deformed under the pressure. When they dove to a depth of 1,000 meters under the sea, some soldiers at the initial stage and the mid-stage of the heaven realm could not withstand the water pressure and wanted to return to the surface. However, the 5 Flood Dragon tribe commanders followed them. When they saw someone trying to return to the surface, they would immediately rush forward and devour him. A commander with an iron ring on his head sneered and said, "Keep diving. Those who dare to retreat will die." Ha ha. Just now, more than 20 soldiers with relatively poor martial cultivations had been eaten by him. Zhang Yuochen looked stern but was simmering with rage inside. He gritted his teeth and restrained himself with difficulty. For a war between two worlds, there was no right or wrong, only victory or defeat. When he saw fellow Kunlun's field soldiers being eaten alive by those flood dragons and unable to resist, he was really aggrieved and furious. Just wait a little longer, Zhang Yuochen told himself. Among the 5 Flood Dragon tribe commanders, 2 had reached the 6th change in the Fish Dragon realm, while the other 3 had even reached the 7th change in the Fish Dragon realm. Besides, a large group of red cloud pythons followed behind them, like an army of the Flood Dragon tribe. Therefore, hundreds of soldiers of the primitive world had to force themselves to continue diving to the bottom of the trench. When they dove to a depth of 5,000 meters below sea level, even the soldiers at the dawn state of the heaven realm could not withstand the water pressure. Their chests and abdomens fell inward and their eyeballs bulged out. Then, with a bang, their bodies exploded and became a mass of blood. The Flood Dragon tribe army did not care whether those primitive world soldiers lived or died. Instead, they whipped those soldiers at the front and forced them to keep moving. At a depth of 10,000 meters below sea level, all the Heaven Realm soldiers had died except for Zhang Yuochen. Some died due to the strong water pressure, while others were eaten by the Flood Dragon tribe commanders. Zhang Yuochen released the space domain, which could help him withstand water pressure, so he was able to survive. Seeing those soldiers of the primitive world die helplessly, Zhang Yuochen turned ghastly pale. He clenched his hands, with strong malice brewing in his eyes. He had been enduring it silently. He knew this was not the time. Even if he was unwilling to do so, he could only endure it. At a depth of 15,000 meters below the sea, even the monks in the Fish Dragon realm were struggling to resist. Their powers were minimized under the pressure. Because of that, it was hard for them to even move their arms, let alone fight. They found themselves in total darkness, unable to see any light. Just then, Zhang Yuochen suddenly stopped. Huang Yanqian looked at Zhang Yuochen, saying, "Zhang Yuochen, how can you stop?" She had just now discovered that Zhang Yuochen's eyes were bloodshot and swollen and blue veins stood out on his face. She did not know the anger that was inside him. She thought that he had stopped because he could not withstand the strong water pressure. Thus, she immediately rushed forward and wanted to help him. He shook his head gently and calmed down, saying, "Senior sister apprentice, go to the bottom of the trench first. Don't worry about me." "Why did you stop?" "Go. Keep diving. The commander with an iron ring on his head growled. He brandished a 33-meter-long flood dragon tendon whip and whipped Zhang Yuochen and Huang Yanjun. Swoosh! The whip sliced through the water and formed a burst of arcuate strength. The commander was originally at the 6th change in the fish dragon realm. However, he could not unleash his strength as a warrior of the heaven realm under the strong water pressure. We're at 15,000 meters below sea level. Even if the half-cents come here, they could only unleash the strength of a warrior in the fish dragon realm. It's time to make the flood dragon tribe pay. This was what he had been waiting for. He turned around, quickly reached out a hand to grasp the whip, and grabbed it with a hard yank. Isn't that enough? Maybe it's my turn now. Zhang Yuochen grabbed the whip and swung his arm. Then, the commander's face was hit heavily. Crack! A big bloody scar was left on his face. His skin was split open and his nose was broken into 2 pieces. Huang Yanjun was slightly surprised because she was completely puzzled by his behavior. Why did he suddenly attack the commander? Alxinian and Orange Star Emissary also stopped. Seeing this, they were also startled. The red cloud pythons were numerous and strong enough, especially the 5 flood dragon tribe commanders. All of them had reached at least the 6th change in the fish dragon realm. Wasn't Zhang Yuochen courting death when he turned against them?